Hi, everyone. By the time you're watching this, it will probably be June 14th or maybe a little later. So this is the recording for our sixth class of our 12th class series. So today I'm going to be talking to you all about fussy eating habits, and we're going to talk about how to help children with fussy eating habits, but also how to help the adults, maybe yourself even, with fussy eating habits. So before we jump into talking about how to help, let's define what is fussy eating, right? So fussy eating typically is a person who has a very restricted group of foods that they might eat. Usually is a food that is sweet or is a very starchy food. So it could be desserts such like cookies and cakes and donuts, or it could be some starchy foods like potato chips, other chips, bread, crackers, but something that typically involves sugar and carbs. So why do people develop fussy eating habits? So fussy eating habits, first of all, it's really important for us to know that fussy eating is always accompanied by some type of anxiety and stress. So a person who has fussy eating habits, they also experiencing some type of stress and anxiety in their lives, not just connected to the food, but in general. The other thing is, it's really important to recognize that fussy eating habits come from an addiction to sugar and starch. Because when we can look from that perspective and we see that that person actually is an addict and they are addicted to sugar and carbs, then we can help them very differently. Because sometimes I work with parents and they tell me like, oh, my child only eats potato chips, crackers, and bread. And I said, okay, so we're going to work on eliminating those foods to help your child eat nutrient-dense food. And they're like, no, but you don't understand. This is the only food my child will eat. That's my point. So when a child is craving those foods, that's a big red flag because your child is addicted to those foods. And when our children are addicted to a certain group of foods, sugar and starch, they are filling up on those foods and they're not hungry enough to eat the other foods. So we have to keep that in mind because keep feeding them those foods in some ways is like giving drug to a drug addict, right? So we wouldn't do that. So in this case, we have to go slow and gentle because of course our kids need to eat. But just keeping in mind, as long as your child is eating the sugary food, the starchy food, they're not going to be hungry enough to eat the healthy foods. But also, there's something else happening, which is the underlying reason why they are fussy eaters. It's because there is an addiction there. Now, where does this addiction come from? So fussy eating habits is directly related to abnormal gut flora. So basically, our body, our whole human body is an ecosystem, similar to like if you have a vegetable garden, or if you've been to a farm, or if you've been even outdoors in nature. There is an ecosystem and there is a balance there. So you have all sorts of plants and animals and things, lives, right? There are lots of different lives that encompass that ecosystem. There are bacteria, there are fungus, there's different things. Our body is the same way. Our digestive system is an ecosystem that has lots of microbes. So microbes are tiny little organisms that live in our body and that when in balance, they help us. They help us be healthy. They help us produce hormones. They help us process vitamins. They help us digest food and absorb food. Now, when that microbe, or what we can call microbiome, gut flora, or the microbes in the digestive system, when the microbes are in balance, when they're abnormal, then there's an overgrowth of certain species, and there's the other species, they kind of sometimes go dormant or they even disappear. And we need that balance because without that balance, then you have too much yeast or you have too much of a pathogenic microbe that can cause a lot of symptoms and toxins, which then cause diseases or some of the symptoms. So as you guys know, I'm going to focus on autism, but for those of you who are not dealing with autism, just know autism is one of the most severe conditions. So if we can help a child or an adult with autism, we can help all the other conditions that we are talking about here, right? So then going back to the balance. So talking about the ecosystem and how we want to create that balance. So typically what we see in a child or adult on the spectrum is they have huge amount of communities of pathogenic microbes that have overgrown and have taken over their gut flora and their digestive system. Now, there are a few things that happen when this huge community of microbes takes over. First of all, they dictate our kids' craving and desires for food. And I know that might sound a little crazy. When I first learned about this, I was like, what? This can't be true. But it is absolutely true. Because every microbe, every microorganism that lives on the planet creates metabolites. Metabolites are information. We create metabolites too. So it's information for our body to our brain, dictating and telling our brain, do more of this or do less of this, right? And those metabolites, they create cravings as well. So imagine if you have a whole community of yeast. Yeast is a fungi that feeds on sugar. Now, if you have a huge community of yeast that has overgrown in your child's digestive system, those microorganisms, they're going to start creating endorphin-like substance, which are the metabolites. They're going to send a message to you and to your brain on what to eat. So basically, imagine the tiny little yeast. They eat that sugar. They create this endorphin-like substance that help them feel good, but also help you feel good because they're living inside you. So you absorb those substances as well. Now, in that moment, when we eat that sugar, if we have yeast overgrowth, we feel good because that yeast, that pathogens, is producing this endorphin-like substance, which then creates the craving, right? The thing is that it doesn't just create a craving. That overgrowth of pathogens and yeast, they also create very, very powerful toxins in our body. And those toxins are the toxins that then create all the symptoms that we see. So a child who has tantrum, a child that has difficulty concentrating and focusing, a child who has a hard time sleeping or regulating their emotions, a child that has trouble dealing with stress, like their tolerance for stress is very low. Anything can trigger them and they can explode, they can have aggressive behavior, they might fight, or they might try to run away from the situation. And that can happen to our adults too. And if your diagnosis is not autism, maybe if it's anxiety, maybe it's something else, you might also have that low tolerance for stress. And that's because, like I was explaining, the pathogens in our body are dictating some of our cravings and some of our behaviors. 1 second, I just got a message that popped up. So then going back to the toxins. So we were talking about how the pathogenic microbes, when there is a huge community, there is an imbalance and they overgrowth. Actually, let me use an analogy here. Imagine if you are like in the jungle, where there are many animals that live there, and some animals, they feed on each other, some animals feed on plant. Now, if the top predator dies, let's say if there is coyotes, right? So if you live in where I live, we have coyotes. If you don't have coyotes, now you're going to have an overgrowth of deer. And so deer don't cause a lot of trouble, but we do know that in this area, we have an overgrowth of tick. It's a little bug. I know I'm talking to people from all over the world. So, but ticks, they are a bug that carry Lyme disease in my community, in my area, right? So now you have an imbalance. So now that there's a tick overgrowth in our area, and that's why now we have Lyme disease. So there are some coyotes and wolves, they're coming to our area, and now we are actually experiencing currently a decrease in deer population. Hopefully, at some point, we're going to also experience a decrease in Lyme disease and tick population. But if we go back to our microbe, if we go back to our digestive system, if I have an overgrowth of yeast, so yeast is now going to take over, and I have too much of the yeast toxins in my body, which are going to cause a lot of symptoms. So some of the symptoms we might see is even migraines, headaches, brain fog, difficult concentration, anxiety. All of those symptoms can be a sign of yeast overgrowth. So fussy eating, first, if we go with like, what is fussy eating? Fussy eating is basically abnormal gut flora dictating to our body what to eat. Now, another thing happened if we talk about the toxins, because the overgrowth of those microbes, they're also creating a lot of toxins in our body. So now the toxins in our body, they're circulating through the whole body. They don't just stay in our digestive system, because as you guys know, we have talked about this in the past. We also have leaky gut. When there's abnormal gut flora, eventually the walls of the digestive system become permeable and they have holes, and things that are supposed to stay in the gut, supposed to stay in our digestive system, they start leaking out of the gut. So now you have all those toxins circulating through the body. And anybody who has leaky gut, we also have a leaky blood-brain barrier. So anything that is circulating in your body through the bloodstream is also entering your brain. So the toxins from our digestive system are actually going now to our brain, because we have leaky gut, then we have leaky blood-brain barrier. So now what happens is we end up with a brain that is inflamed and it's full of toxins. And some of those toxins produced by that overgrowth of the microbes that we have. For example, if we have yeast overgrowth, now we have the toxins from yeast, which are entering our kids' brain or our own brain. So when we have those toxins entering our brain, what happens is it creates well, first of all, we have this big brain fog when our brain is not able to focus and concentrate and function in the way that it's supposed to. The other thing that happens is it gives you a distorted perception of reality and a distorted perception of the environment and even of your own body, because it affects our sensory processing system. So our sensory processing system happens in our brain, and that's when we process the sensory input from around us. So the visual, the sounds, movement, touch, taste, smell, all our sensory processing pieces happen in our brain. So our body takes in the input from the environment, and then it's processed in our brain, and then it gives a message to our brain like, oh, this is a plant. I see something green and it looks like a plant. This is a plant. I smell onion, then it gives me the message that is onion. If it's a light touch, then it gives my brain the message, this is a friendly touch. If it's a hard touch, then it gives my brain the message, this is unsafe. Now, for our kids or adults who have a toxic brain, their perception of what they see, what they hear, what they smell, what they taste, how they feel in the body gets distorted, right? Movement. So kids might even see things at times. They might hear things that are not there because there's a distortion of the sensory processing mechanism in our body. So when we have that happening as well, what happens is our kids start becoming even more picky eaters or more fussy eaters, because now their ability to process what they're tasting and what they have in their mouth is also distorted. So for a child who has a lot of toxins in their brain, the smell of food can be quite offensive at times and can be very overwhelming. I have worked with children that if I walk in the playroom at the time when I was working with this organization, I walk in the playroom with a tray with broccoli, they would start screaming, no, get that broccoli out of here, because their sense of smell is so intense that they can't handle the sulfur smell in the broccoli, right? Or a hard-boiled egg or whatever the food, sometimes it's onion. It's similar to a woman who is pregnant where we can't tolerate certain smells, also because our sensory system is affected by the hormones circulating in our body, right? But that helps us have compassion and understanding for our kids. And why is it so hard for them to even touch certain foods? Or for some kids, if one food touches the other, they freak out. Or if it's more of a mushy or a slimy consistency, they hate it. A lot of kids on the spectrum, they prefer crunchy and dry foods because that helps them with processing in terms of their sensory input in their mouth. So we want to have compassion and understanding. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to keep feeding them those foods that are feeding pathogens because they have an aversion to the healthier foods, right? But there are ways that we can help them and encourage them. And I'll be talking to you today about how to do this. So far, we want to understand where does fussy eating come from? And basically is the overgrowth of pathogens in our kids' body that are dictating the cravings and the desires from them producing endorphin-like substance that give a pleasure temporarily, right? And then there's the crash. But also with the metabolites sending messages to our brain, you need to eat more sugar, otherwise you're going to die. And we think we're going to die. And actually we're not. It's the pathogens that are dying. Any of you that did an elimination diet, or if you already started with the GAPS diet, which I know a lot of you have already, you know that after that die-off period, you actually feel better. But the pathogens are the ones that are dying off and hopefully eventually leaving our body, right? Getting out of our body and moving on to the next phase of their life or whatever it is. So let me just check on my notes. So we talk about the pathogenic microbes, and they always crave sugar and carbs, right? So you know if you're craving sugar and carbs, you know that is not your body, because the human body can actually live with no sugar and with a moderate amount of carbs, which we can find in vegetables and other foods. We don't have to eat processed, refined carbohydrates and sugar to feed our own body. That only feeds pathogens. I talk about the distorted sensory perception. And so one other thing in terms of distorted sensory perception, if we talk about the mouth, so there's some foods that your child might have an aversion to it right now. They might even gag and look like they're about to throw up when they see certain foods. And that's a real thing. Your child is not faking, that's a real thing. And it's because of when we have an imbalance in our digestive system, abnormal gut flora in our digestive system, we also have abnormal gut flora in our mouth, right? So again, those pathogens in our mouth are the ones they are gagging and having an aversion and sending messages to our brain. We're in danger, fight, right? And it does affect us as well. So kids will have a really distorted sense of temperature as well. So even if the food is slightly warm, for a certain child, that might seem like too hot or too strong. Some kids, as they start doing the GAPS diet, they would literally wipe their tongue and wipe their mouth and spit out. It's very common as kids are going through detox. They are spitting out because all the toxins in their mouth are binding with the healthy foods, and it's hopefully being carried out of the body. But in the process of that happening, there is die-off symptoms, and there is a lot of some intensity that happens with it, right? So it's normal to see distorted sense of perception of taste, temperature, texture, but also aversion to the foods. And that to us is just a red flag. It's just highlighting to us how this child really is dealing with abnormal gut flora. And that's where we want to start, by helping them with that. So the other thing is, when you have abnormal gut flora, so abnormal microbes who are growing in the body, who are craving those substances, it creates a vicious cycle, right? So a vicious cycle, basically vicious is the same as addiction. It creates this vicious cycle where we crave the very substance that actually makes us sick, and that feeds the pathogens that create the toxins that make us sick and gives us the symptoms. So that's really important to know, that there is a vicious cycle there, and we want to break the vicious cycle. And also, I want to just mention to you guys some readings here. Of course, the main one is this book, which I know most of you already have and you've been reading. If you don't have this book, I might be sharing this video with a few other people. So if you don't have this book, this is the place to start. Absolutely start with The Gut and Psychology Syndrome by Dr. Natasha Campbell-McBride. If you read that and you want to advance further in learning about how what we eat creates our craving and helps you understand the whole idea of vicious cycle, this is a great book, which is called Breaking the Vicious Cycle by Elaine Gottschall. And Elaine here is her name. You guys can all take a picture. So basically, Dr. Natasha created the GAPS diet around the year 2000, maybe a little bit earlier. That's when she started working with her son. But the principles of what she teaches, this has been studied since the 40s and 50s, and that's what Elaine describes here in her book. So this is research that has been going on for, I want to say 70-something years now. So any diet right now that is to help children on the autism spectrum, they come from this idea. So if you talk about gluten-free, casein-free diet, sugar-free diet, body ecology diet, specific carbohydrate diet, the GAPS diet, any diet that was designed to help a child or an adult on that autism spectrum basically comes from this. So this book is really helpful because it will help you understand. Those other diets, they have evolved. Some of them, I call them the lazy diet, right? Because you really don't address the abnormal gut flora. So by eliminating some foods like the gluten-free diet, okay, you eliminate gluten, but it's kind of a shortcut that doesn't really address the root cause. And so it doesn't really address the abnormal gut flora, which is what we want to address. And I call it the lazy diet because it's kind of like a shortcut. And I think whoever created that was just trying to, I don't know, I shouldn't say that because I don't know. But basically, it doesn't help. It helps temporarily. But then eventually, we do want to address the big thing, which is where are the toxins coming from? And so when we address the root cause, then we are able to help our children heal so that eventually they can transition to a more variety and so that we don't have to like stay off of a group of food for the rest of their lives, right? Okay, so that's with the diet. Okay, so then how do we break the vicious cycle? So take a moment and think. So if the vicious cycle is happening and the cravings and the fussy eating is happening because of normal gut flora, what do we want to do? We want to repopulate our gut with beneficial microbes. But also, we want to stop feeding pathogens because as long as we keep feeding pathogens, those pathogens are going to keep growing. Even if you try to introduce new microbes, beneficial microbes, the community of overgrowth pathogenic microbes is so big right now, they're dominating, right? So if you have lots of ticks, you can put a lot of chickens there and guinea hens to eat the ticks. But if you keep feeding the ticks, they're going to keep reproducing, right? So it's much harder to maintain that tick population. So we want to do two things. We want to stop feeding the pathogens, and we want to repopulate the gut flora with beneficial microbes that will help rebalance that. So how do we starve the pathogenic microbes? Sugar and carbs. It's not forever, but for a minimum of 6 months to a year, we do want to stay completely off sugar and carbs because that is going to actually help the pathogenic microbes die. The beneficial microbes, they're wonderful and they eat whatever you feed them. So if you feed them vegetables, they eat vegetables. If you feed them protein, they eat protein. If you feed them fat, they eat fat. It's really the sugar and the carbs that feeds pathogenic microbes. And some people actually have even a theory that some beneficial microbes can become pathogenic when they become too toxic because they're having too much sugar or too much carbs. I actually really like that concept, and I've seen it. I've seen it actually because I've seen people test for different compositions of gut biome, and when they change their diet, they still have that composition, but they're not having the symptoms. And I think because now they're feeding healthier foods to those pathogens, and then maybe the pathogens become beneficial. This is not a crazy theory. There are a lot of scientists studying this right now. But regardless of that, we do want to make sure that we stop feeding the pathogenic microbes, or we stop feeding them the food that makes them pathogenic by eliminating sugar completely. Sugar has a lot of problems. Sugar creates inflammation because our body doesn't know what to do with it. Sugar in excess is one of the most dangerous things. We see that in diabetes, right? So when there's too much sugar, the body needs to get rid of it and doesn't know how to. And so we have all these microbes that feed on that sugar, sometimes in order to help us because we can't handle, right? So we want to stop ingesting sugar to reduce inflammation, and so that we can also stop feeding those pathogens. The GAPS diet is ideal for that because it not only we cut down completely sugar, we reduce starch to a minimum, and it's the starch that our body can quickly process and absorb so it doesn't stay in the system long enough so it would feed pathogens. And the other piece, which is amazing about GAPS, and only the body ecology diet addresses this piece, which is we need to repopulate the gut with beneficial microbes, right? With fermented foods, probiotics, so we can take probiotic capsules. There's some great probiotics out there. Smidge is one of them. But also with fermented foods. So I often talk about sauerkraut, beet kvass, and other fermented vegetables for some people when they are ready. Then fermented raw organic dairy, which has nothing to do with the dairy that we buy at the store. That's completely different. They actually should have two different names because they are so dramatically different. But I don't want to get too much into fermented dairy because that is a more advanced food for people who are just starting now. That would not be a part of your diet. You want to really focus on probiotic and also probiotic foods, which is lacto-fermented foods, like Dr. Natasha teaches in her book, The Gut and Psychology Syndrome. So those are the two main things that we want to do to address fussy eating. We want to eliminate the sugar, the very food that your child craves, and maybe that's the only food your child is currently eating. So then the first question that I get from parents when I say this is, but that's all my child eats. They're gonna starve. And I'll tell you, they won't. Your child can go longer without eating than you as a parent can stand, watch them not eat. Let me say that again. Your child can go longer without eating than we parents can stand watch them not eat. Right? So it's really hard when you have a child who hasn't eaten for a day or two, you start getting concerned. You're like, oh, I'm just going to feed them the grilled cheese sandwich because I know they're going to eat it. The thing is, the minute we feed that, we're feeding that pathogen and we're feeding into that vicious cycle. Basically, we have a human instinct of survival. And I've never, ever, ever, in 21 years of practice, I've never seen a child starve themselves. I've seen parents give in, and I've seen parents give the child the food that they are wanting because they can't stand this process. Because the other piece is as we are starving pathogens, you have die-off symptoms. So whatever your child's symptoms are, if you were dealing with tantrums, if you're dealing with anxiety, if you're dealing with a child who doesn't sleep at night, you might see those symptoms get worse temporarily, not forever, just temporarily. You might see those symptoms get worse before they get better. Because remember, those are the symptoms that the pathogens are creating. They are creating by the toxins. So the pathogens create certain toxins that in turn create the behavior in our children. So when those pathogens are dying off, they produce more of those substance and those toxins as they leave in the body, right? So you might see temporarily a little bit of worsen of the symptoms before it gets better. But it will get better if you stick with it long enough. So then going back to, oh, my child would never eat. My child would never eat this bowl of soup. My child would never eat a steak. The thing is, we do have a human survival instinct. And your child will eat what you offer to them at some point if you don't have the not wanted foods around. So let's say if your child craves grilled cheese sandwich, or if your child craves cupcakes, you get rid of the cupcakes, your child might not eat for a day or two. eventually your child will eat whatever you present to them, whatever it's in front of them, because they have that instinct of survival. And they're going to be hungry enough that they will eat the food that you offer. So that's the very first thing. When you feel like, oh, I'm ready to do this. Oh, and before we talk about being ready, let me remind you of all the benefits of doing this. Why actually helping your child with fussy eating habits and getting rid of sugar and starch, why this is going to help your child. Your child is going to be able to feel physically well. So if your child has digestive issues, if your child has inflammation and has constant headaches, if your child has stomachache, if your child has any type of physical condition, that is going to help them physically. This is going to help your child emotionally, because remember, a lot of the symptoms that your child is experiencing now has to do with toxins from the abnormal gut flora, from toxins that are leaching from the digestive system to the rest of the body. They're dealing with inflammation. So your child is going to be able to learn more. Your child is going to be able to concentrate and focus. Your child is going to be much easier to live with. Your child is going to have less tantrums, less meltdowns. Your child will be happier. I can tell you that some of the happiest children that I work with, children who are on autism spectrum, are the kids who do GAPS diet. GAPS diet, or who do some version of GAPS diet, like the specific carbohydrate diet or body ecology diet. Those are very happy children. Those are children who are engaged, excited about life. They're ready to learn. They are really a pleasure to be with. Your child's tolerance for stress is going to go up when you do this, when you eliminate sugar and carbs, because your child is not going to be in that constant state of fight or flight. The state of fight or flight, remember, comes from toxins in the brain, abnormal gut flora producing those toxins, right? So you're going to have a child who's able to tolerate stress, and a child who's able to process sensory input, who is not seeing things from a distorted perspective, which can also affect some emotional, like some kids, I've seen it, some girls, teenager girls, they have a very distorted perception of what's happening around them, of how their peers are engaging with them, sometimes even their parents are engaging with them. And that has to do with toxins in their brain because of all the reasons that I just explained, right? So you will have a child who's happier, physically healthier, emotionally stable and well, and a child who can learn and grow. I'm a huge fan of this, huge, because I have, for more than 2 decades now, I have seen that that's really the way to move forward and help our sensitive kids who are struggling. And it's something we can all do at home. Okay, so then the very first thing, we want to get rid of the unwanted foods. This is it. Because as long as you have that food in your house, your child will know and they will hold off on eating the foods that you want them to eat, because they're going to be waiting for that cupcake, that grilled cheese. So getting rid of the unwanted foods. I want to talk a little bit more about this. So I'm working with a family right now. The whole family, mom, dad, and their 2 kids are doing it. And at this after a few sessions, the mom said, you know what, I have to just focus on myself because this is so intense that I can't do that for the rest of the family. This mom, she eliminated everything out of her house that she didn't want to eat that would feed pathogens. She has IBS and she has other challenges. She was having trouble conceiving and hormonal imbalance, anxiety, low energy, fibromyalgia. She has a bunch of stuff going on. So she eliminated the sugar, the carbs. She only has GAPS. She actually literally got in the car and she has this dialogue happening in her head. At the same time, she's like, no, you're not supposed to eat this food. And she's like, I just need it. So she got in her car, drove to a store and got a big donut. And she's like, I know there was nothing nutritious in that donut. It was like it had food coloring and all sorts of things. She's like, I just could not resist, right? So for an adult, it's not just eliminating it, it also takes discipline. It takes a lot of discipline, and you have to keep reminding yourself of your why. Why am I doing this, right? So I'm doing this so I can conceive. I'm doing this so that I can be in my children's life and participate in their life fully without being exhausted. I'm doing this so that I'm not anxious and depressed. I'm doing this so that maybe the next generation is going to be healthier, right? Because if I conceive when I'm not well, I'm passing my microbes to my kids, right? Because we pass that during pregnancy and after pregnancy to our children. So always reminding yourself of your why and having a sense of discipline as well. And then having somebody in their life that can help you, somebody that can help you be accountable and stick with it if you're an adult. For adults right now, I also want to talk another piece. If you have in the past have intrusive thoughts, you have had maybe bipolar. I know we're working with a group of people here who have many different conditions. So if you deal with bipolar or schizophrenia, where you might have had intrusive thoughts and it was hard to control those at times, it would be really important to identify somebody in your life that can help you. Somebody who you can go to and say, hey, I'm having these thoughts that I absolutely have to eat this cupcake right now, otherwise I'm gonna die and I need it. So you can go to that person, somebody who's loving, non-judgmental, somebody who's compassionate that can help you say, okay, let's sit here for a moment, Marie. Let's talk about this. And that person can, in that moment, offer you some protein and some fat, because protein and fat will help you resist that craving. And so they can go and get you a bowl of soup or something. Say, let's sit here a little bit before you go get that cupcake. Let's just have a little chat, right? So you can teach them ahead of time what to do when you come to that place. Or they can remind you, remember when you asked me 3 weeks ago, whenever you wanted to go out and buy the cupcake, you wanted me to remind you of your whys and why you're doing this. So you have that person that can help you with that. If you do slip and you have a craving and you eat that food, that's okay. You come back, you get back on the horse and you say, okay, I'm going to go back to it and I'm going to resist it the next time. So the thing with craving is we don't want to judge ourselves. We don't want to be hard on ourselves. We just want to keep focusing forward. Okay, so I ate that. I can't change it, right? We don't want to do that. I want to just keep going forward at this point. So being also towards yourself, towards your children, towards the people you're helping with, having a non-judgmental attitude, knowing that person is doing the very best that they can. They want your help, but sometimes it's really hard to resist. Also, when you have intrusive thoughts, telling yourself, this isn't me. These are pathogens and microbes that are leaving my body. Let's say a prayer to them. Let's do a little thing to them and say goodbye. Say, hey, you're on your way. Maybe for those of you that already learned about beet kvass, you have a little sip of beet kvass, go take a little nap, because by the time you wake up, probably you're going to be able to handle better whatever those thoughts that were in your mind were happening. And then cancel those thoughts. So you can always cancel a negative thought, an intrusive thought with a positive thing. So tell yourself a different story. If you're telling yourself, I'm not good enough, whatever you might tell yourself in those moments, right? Tell yourself the very opposite. I am worth it. I'm a good human being. I have lived to this day of my life because I have always taken a step forward. Maybe I take a step back, but I always go a little bit forward. And just the fact that you're doing this course or that you're working with me, that just shows that you have a desire to help yourself, help your children. So focus on that, right? We don't have to be perfect, but just find something that we can acknowledge and love ourselves and appreciate in ourselves in that moment will help you. Practice gratitude. So when things are getting hard, just say, hey, let's take a moment here to acknowledge the great in me, the great in the things I've done, and the great in life, the great in my life. I have a roof over over my head. And hey, if I slip into this craving, that's okay. I can always go back and press the restart button. Every single moment of our life, we can restart again. So that's with how to break the vicious cycle. We need discipline. And sometimes we need help to be disciplined, right? With our kids, we have control. Oh, I do want to say this one thing. If your child is under 16, they don't have a driver's license, they don't have a credit card, you in charge. They are not in charge, right? They can't drive themselves to a store and buy that food. If your child is eating a food that is not helping them, it's because of the parents. And I love you. And that's why I'm telling you, because I've been in that place too. And I know we can blame school, we can blame the neighbor, we can blame the grandparents, but at the end of the day, it's on us, right? So it's easier if you have a child who's younger, and that's why I suggest do this now versus doing it later, because you are in control over what they eat. You can ask for a doctor's note for the school that says your child can only eat those things. You can incorporate in your child's IEP what they can eat and what they cannot eat. You can say in your child's IEP, my child can only eat foods that come from home. And there you go, you're in charge of it. I know it's not easy, but I would tell you, it's the first 2 to 3 weeks, they're hard. After that, it's just benefits. The first 2 or 3 weeks is hard because that's when we're dealing with craving. After that, pathogens go dormant, and they might still be in our body, lingering around a little longer, trying to hold on to the case that maybe you will slip in and resist, won't resist and feed them again. But after those 3 weeks, they go dormant, and now your child is going to start craving the really nourishing foods that will nourish their brain, that will nourish their body, that will help them with the detoxing process and carrying toxins out of the body. So discipline and remembering that if you're doing this for your child, you're in charge. And so even if your child has a tantrum, even if your child gets aggressive, you're still in charge. And we can do one-on-one sessions, or we can talk about, if we're doing the course, if you guys are doing the course, we can talk about how to handle a child when they get intense or aggressive because they're not getting their fix or their sugar or their carbs, right? So then repopulating beneficial microbes, you want to definitely think about probiotics, but also probiotic foods, fermented cabbage, beet kvass, and other things. So then discipline. Oh, the other thing too about kids to think is your child would not have the drive to do that on their own. So you can't send your child to school and tell them, don't eat cupcakes or don't eat cookies, because that would be very, very hard for them to understand. They are still children, and they don't yet understand why this is harmful for them or why this is not helping them. Because when they eat that, they feel good, right? And so they do need your guidance as parents. And you might, for a period of time, you might have to create a schedule and design in a certain way so that your child doesn't have access to certain foods, especially those first several weeks, maybe a month, where your child is not around certain foods, or you have an adult, an aide, a teacher, or somebody there that is on board that supports you so that they can help your child not go and grab a cookie out of another child's hand and eat it, or go to the dessert table at an event or at a function and take something, right? We have to intervene there. For the adults, we want to really rely on our own self-discipline, reminding ourselves, this is why I'm doing this. This is why this is going to help me. And then there's another thing. To help with cravings for adults, I always suggest bring always some food with you wherever you go, especially in the very beginning. If you have had sugar, you gotta give yourself at least 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, without having had any sugar or any highly carb food until you're able to resist that craving. So the way to help you resist that craving is bring some food with you. If you're doing GAPS already and you love your soups, bring a bowl of soup, or you can bring a bowl. So you put it in a thermos, bring that with you. If you're doing full GAPS, you can bring a little steak or a little meat cut up. Protein is what's going to really help you with craving. So when you have a craving for sugar, chocolate, cupcake, whatever that is, take a little bite of protein, some meat with some salt in it. If you can have a little bit of fat, like a piece of butter on top of it, or a piece of meat that is fatty, if you can eat that, that will really, really help you with that craving in that moment. For those of you that are doing soup, you can also blend your soup. So you can make a vegetable soup that has protein. You want a lot of protein there, meat stock. You blend that before you leave the house. You put it in a thermos, you close it so it stays warm. When you drink that, it's going to be blended already. So it's going to be ready for you to process, digest, and absorb. So it's going to get to your cells faster. The other thing to drinking a soup is easier. So if you're working with somebody, or if you're meeting with somebody, if you're doing something, it's easier to drink that blended soup because it's kind of like a smoothie kind of condition, texture, right? So bring something with you always. I was going to say one other thing. Oh, for those of you who are familiar with GAPS and been doing GAPS, you can also do a GAPS shake. GAPS shake has eggs and a source of fat, and some vegetables in it. The only thing is the GAPS shake won't last as long. You can put it in a thermos that has been frozen first, so it keeps it cold, but you're probably going to have to drink that within 30 minutes to an hour. Otherwise, it doesn't taste good. But that's another option there. And then the last one is you can make that honey and butter mixture that we talked about, and you can have a little bit of that, but that would be my last resort because you're still getting the honey, which can still feed pathogens. So preferably, if you can do the protein, that's going to be better for you. So for those of you who are doing GAPS for yourself as adults, and you have a more severe condition, do identify someone in your life that can help and support you, that can hold you accountable, that you can check in with and can remind you of the benefits of you doing this. The other thing is avoid places for a period of time, maybe the first month of when you're changing from eating sugar and carbs to eating more protein, healthy fats, more vegetables, fermented food, even if you're not doing GAPS yet, but when you're doing like a diet change with no sugar and no carbs or low carbs, avoid places that you know are going to have highly sugary foods and lots of carbs, right? I'm going to tell you guys a story about my husband. Maybe some people here know him because I'm going to share this video with some other people. They're not just in the course. But my husband, he did GAPS for 3 months. He was very, very, very on it. He was super excited about it. He really was sticking to it. The first 2 weeks were very, very hard. He had a lot of die-off. He experienced pretty much every die-off symptom you can imagine. After that, on the 3rd or 4th week, he's like, I've never felt so good. I have all this energy. And he's already very ADHD. He has a lot of energy. And he's like, I have so much energy. I feel like I can do everything. He said to me, my vision got better. His mental clarity got better. He's very dyslexic too. And he was able to read and process information way better at the time. And he was really like, I like this. I'm going to eat like this for the rest of my life, right? At the end of March, it was the end of March or beginning of April, so really on the 3-month mark. And I told him, like, you got to keep doing this because the pathogens, they go dormant for 6 months, for some people up to a year. So if you go back and you eat the carbs and the sugar, all those pathogens that have been dormant, they're going to wake up, and they're going to wake up really hungry, right? And they're going to send all those messages, all those metabolites to your brain. We need more of this. So you're going to be dealing with a big community of very starving pathogens that want more of that. And he listened to me until one day he left the house without his GAPS food, without his soup. He was a ski instructor in the winter. He went to a ski instructor party and they served pizza. And he ate, he came home and he said, I had pizza. I'm like, okay, how many pieces did you have? And he's like, I had 4 pieces. So I'm like, okay, so you had enough to feed a lot of pathogens. Like, I'm good. I feel fine. I feel really good, he said to me, right? The next day, he's like, I still feel really good. Well, a week later, I found a lot of chocolate wrappers in his car. So this is the person who was like, I can do this. This is the best thing. The minute he had that pizza, then that craving came back so strong. So he was going to the gas station to get gas, and he would get a candy. And then the next time he would get 2 candies. And so to the point, and he would just sit in the car and he kept the wrappers in his car, but I found them. And he's an adult, it's up to him what he does. But if he wants my support again, he has not gone back to Gaps, though I'm going to encourage him to do it in the summer. He hasn't gone back to it, but I'm going to remind him, you did so well. So now you just got to do a little longer, right? But for him, because his cravings were so intense, avoiding a place where you know those foods that aren't helping you, the foods that make you sick, avoid those places for at least a month when you start the diet again. And then when you go back, when you pass a month and now you're not craving those foods, you gotta remind yourself to bring something to eat, because he will go teach during the day. He's a teacher in the morning. And then after that, he will go and do his ski instructor stuff. So if he doesn't bring enough food, he's going to be so hungry. I'm at the point now, I have done Gaps for so many years, and I have done the intro diet so much that I can actually go for a whole day without eating. I don't suggest anybody doing that. But in my case, I feel like I'm not nutrient deficient, that I can go a whole day without eating. And I'd rather do that than if I eat something that will make me sick. But most people, you still have so many nutrient deficiencies. Your body's still deprived of the proper nutrients that it needs for function, that you cannot go too long without eating, right? A person who is starting GAPS diet, you need to eat at least every 2 hours, because your body needs all the nutrients and the protein and the whatever, the fat and the vitamins and all of that. So where was I going with that? Oh, so bring your food. If you're going somewhere, bring your food, and don't worry about what other people are going to think. Just explain to them, I'm doing this thing that is really helping me. I'm doing so well with it, and I want to stick with it. So I have my food here. And then if you go somewhere where you know they're going to have the foods that you can eat, or some version of GAPS food that is like not sugar carbs, do not go for the sugar and carbs, then you can eat that, what they have there, right? So just as a reminder, we want to have discipline. We want to remind ourselves of our why. We want to get rid of the unwanted foods, get it out of the house. Do not go for the places that have those foods for a period of time, not forever, right? Just for a couple of weeks, maybe 3-4 weeks, if your cravings were really, really strong. And then after that, you bring your food with you, and then you're good. And then the last thing I had here in my notes was, just remember, pathogens go dormant. So when you feel like you're really doing good and you are, you have repopulated your gut flora with probiotic foods, with probiotic capsules, and you feel like you're doing really well, it's really important to stick with this for at least 6 months to a year, depending on your condition. If we're talking about autism, we're talking about a year to more. If a child who is severely autistic, sometimes they do that for several years. But now you have a child who's learning. You have a child who's happy. You have a child that can engage and have a back and forth conversation. You have a child who is easy to live with, who participates in life and learns and has friends, right? So why not do that for a very long time? Because you're helping them in so many areas. And at the end of the day, what we're doing is we are eating the way that our ancestors ate. We're eating the way that our great-grandparents ate, the people before them. We are eating in the way that many, many, many generations ate before us, and they did well, right? So we're not asking for you guys to go into some random type of diet where you only do things that no one ever did. And we haven't seen generation after generation thriving on it. We're suggesting do something that we've seen from thousands of years humans thrive on, which is no processed food, no sugar, no refined carbs, right? Grains are very complicated and problematic right now. So if you are at that point where you feel like, okay, I eliminated gluten, I eliminated sugar, I eliminated dairy, but I'm still not feeling great, then the next thing is you want to eliminate those grains, because grains can be very problematic, hard to digest, to break down, and to utilize for the human body. But remember, we have seen, or humanity has seen, this type of diet be around for a very long time, and people did very well when actually there weren't high numbers of autism. There weren't lots of cardiovascular diseases and all the chronic conditions that we see today. They didn't exist when our ancestors ate in the way that I'm suggesting right now, which is no carbs or no refined carbs, no sugar, no processed food. All right, so I'm going to pause here, and then we're going to talk about ways to work with children who are fussy eaters. All right, so now let's talk about how to help our fussy eaters with eating new foods. So I'm going to first talk about children. So with kids, we want to make this a really easy, relaxed, fun experience to them. We want them to associate eating this new diet, eating this new way, as a fun and wonderful experience. So we want to focus on what will we be eating. We don't want to focus on the deprivation, right, piece. We're not going to say you can't eat this and you can't eat this and this, and basically listing all their favorite foods. Instead of doing that, we're going to start introducing the new foods that we want them to eat that are delicious, and why it's going to be amazing to eat this way. So, of course, start with becoming familiar what the GAPS foods are. Remember, this book was created to help a child on the autism spectrum heal. And it has been used for over 20 years now, helping so many children get better. So become familiar with what the GAPS foods are, and then start preparing them. Start preparing some meat stock, start preparing some fermented foods. Fermented food is an acquired taste, so that wouldn't be the first thing I would start with my child, but I would start with some meat stock, with some roasted meats. If your child has an aversion to meat and they're eating like a standard American diet, I would really start with some roasted meat, full GAPS kind of recipes, salads. If they like vegetables, but they don't like them soggy, they like them more crispy, you can make like kale chips and things like that. And start getting like really excited and sharing with your child, this is amazing, we're going to do this together. If you can have your whole family do it, it's preferable, it's easier, because then you can really get rid of the unwanted foods. But focus on the benefits and what we will be doing and why. And then explain to your child, we're going to go on this amazing diet that is going to help you feel more at ease, and it's going to help you make friends, and it's going to help you learn in class. It's going to help you be able to write better. That actually did happen with my husband. His dysgraphia actually improved when he was doing the GAPS diet. Mental clarity. So explain to your child at your child's age level the benefits that will come from this. Then we want to make it really fun for them. We want to incorporate the things they want. So as somebody who works with children on the spectrum, when I'm working with a child where we're introducing the GAPS diet, the very first time I spend time with them, the very first hour that I do, I just play with them. I'm not talking about food. I'm not talking about changing anything. I just want to go into their world. I want to get to know them. I want to bond with them. And I just play with them. I play with them doing the things they want. If they're on the spectrum and they're doing their stimming behavior, I do their stimming behavior with them. So if they're going like this, I do that too. If they're looking through a book, I get my own book and I look through it. If they're playing with a car, that's a way to bond and get to know that child, that person. That might be an adult who has autism as well. So the very first hour is like, I have no agenda. I just want to bond and connect with this human being and love them. So then after that, I'm going to have bonded and I'm going to have found out some things about this child. Maybe this child likes cars. Maybe this child likes marble runs. I don't know if you guys know this. It's a really fun game. A lot of kids that I work with, they like this. It's called marble run. Maybe they've been playing with this. So now I'm thinking, okay, this is where I connect with this child. This is what they love. So then the next time I'm going to work with them, depending where they at and depending if the parents are ready to start with this, then we're going to explain to the child what we're about to do. in a positive way and in a non-threatening way, right? I'm not going to say you're not going to be eating this. I'm going to focus on what they will be eating and the benefits. And that we are going to be doing this together, and that we know of many children who have done this before, who are cheering for them around the world. GAPS families, they're all around the world, and when they hear about each other, they really cheer for each other and they get really excited. There are some GAPS families, they are pen pals, and they have the kids writing to each other. So you can tell them about this amazing community out there that is cheering for them, celebrating them. Now you want to start incorporating the thing that your child loves in a playful way with the food that you want to introduce. But instead of putting pressure on your child having to eat that food, you're going to eat it, right? So you're going to start by being a role model. So if you want your child to eat a roast, then you're going to prepare their roast. So let's say my child loves marble run. I'm going to grab my marble run balls here that I have. I have some little marbles. Oops. I'm going to just put them right here. So now it's my second session working with this child. I bring marble run because I know he loves or she loves. And we start playing with this. And then I have that meat prepared. Oh, actually, before we have the meat prepared, we want to make sure that this child hasn't been eating like tons of French fries or some other food that we don't want them to eat ahead of time, because then they're not going to be hungry and they're more likely to want to have nothing to do with that food, right? But now I'm going to basically, I have my marble and I'm playing with them and I'm like, well, this is fun. And then I have the marbles run. We play with this for a while. And then I would tell this child, I'm like, you know that we have a marble run in our human body as well. And I might take a book. And if you guys ever want some resources of books, I have amazing books here that explain about the digestive system, the human body, and what food does and how it helps us. So I might show a picture of the digestive tract to my child and say, hey, guess what? This is a marble run too, but we don't put marbles there. And actually, let me just say, if you have a child who has a tendency of putting non-food items in their mouth, or a child who is younger, don't do anything with marbles, please, because it's unsafe. But now if we're talking about a child who knows and differentiates what is an edible food from a non-edible food, and they don't have pica where they put food in their mouth, there is no food items. So now I'm going to say, we have this kind of food run. Maybe we don't call it marble run. Let's call it food run. And where we put things, and it's kind of like a marble run, where the food goes down, it goes down the slide, and then it goes around, and there's like maybe a seesaw, and it goes up and down. So you can even do an illustration where you draw the digestive tract and this little piece of food, maybe a little piece of meat or a piece of like whatever your child likes, but it's a GAPS food, like maybe scrambled eggs, and you give like eyes and a smile, and you have like this piece of egg that is going down the digestive system, and say, this is fun. Oh, I want to eat some more. So again, you're not putting pressure on your child. You're not even asking them to eat at this point yet. You're just focusing on yourself. You eating that GAPS food that you want to introduce, either if it's meat or vegetable or whatever it is, grilled chicken or a steak. And then you eat that and like, oh, I feel so good. Ah, I can think better now, and I can read this better. And oh, I feel so happy. I want to have another piece. Then maybe you bring a character that your child likes. So if your child likes Mickey Mouse, maybe you have a doll of a Mickey Mouse that comes and has a picnic with you. Let's see a character that I have here. I have a huge bin. Maybe your child likes fairies. So you would dress like a fairy. You have a girl that likes a fairy, you dress, oh, I'm a fairy and I like to eat steak too. So then you eat that steak and you're like, oh, this makes my fairy wings get even stronger. Or you can actually have like where you make a fairy doll with your daughter or your son. Maybe your son likes fairies, where you have this felt material, and you can get this at a store, and you start making fairies. And every time you add maybe some hair to the fairy or a wing to the fairy, you can say, oh, I'm getting really hungry. I need a little piece of steak. So you pretend to feed that steak to the fairy. You eat some of yourself, like, oh, now I can fly, and I'm a stronger fairy now because I'm eating that food. So basically, the whole idea is you want to incorporate what your child already loves to eating your foods and helping them see how fun this is. Now, let me give you other examples. If you have a child who loves cars, then I would have some cars here. And then the cars are going to eat some of that food. Oh, now my marble is running all over the place. But now you have different cars that you're feeding. And now maybe they have a race. Like, oh, now that we had a steak, we can have a race. And they both get at the end and they do really well. Like, yoo-hoo! The winners are the two cars who ate the most steak. Woohoo! Eating steak makes the cars be fast. So again, you're incorporating what your child loves with that food that you want to introduce. And you want to make it in a really non-threatening way by you eating, the character eating, the car eating, and you want to have that available to your child. You have a bowl and you just leave it there. But don't even ask them or tell them to eat. You're just getting them to become familiar with the food and to start creating a relationship with that food where they feel comfortable and at ease with it. I want to give you guys other suggestions. So a lot of boys that I work with, and I'm saying boys and girls because I've just seen boys like this more, but dinosaurs. So if you have a puzzle of a dinosaur, you can say, okay, we got to have a little bit of food before we take the first piece. Oh, now I'm strong enough. I can look for the first piece. Oh, these are some big teeth. I wonder what this dinosaur eats. I think this is a carnivore dinosaur because he's so big, he had to eat some meat. Let's see where the other piece is. Okay, here it is. Oh, look at this dinosaur, it's coming to life. I think this is his mouth. Wait, I hear something. What? I think the dinosaur is talking. What is it, dinosaur? You know what the dinosaur just told me? He said he wants some steak. He said he loves steak too. Okay, dinosaur, I'll give you some steak. Ooh, I love steak. Oh, the dinosaur just said he loves steak. So every time I give the dinosaur some steak, look at that. Now his face is coming alive. So now I'm going to be playful and start putting this puzzle together. I'm pretending that I'm feeding the dinosaur to my child. Or you can have the puzzle up high, and every time your child, let's say if your child is already at that point where they start eating something that you want them to eat, you're like, yay, that's awesome. You know, this is so cool. Let's put a puzzle together. Every time you have a bite of this food, I'll bring a piece of the puzzle down and give it to you. So you're making it really fun and you're incorporating those things here. And just think of like, what is it that your child likes? Let me see what else I have here. I have this other game too, which has marbles. It's like a tic-tac-toe. It's like a miniature. So you want some little games. They're kind of miniature that you can have at the table when eating. And so you can incorporate that. So then you take another marble that is now rolling all over the floor. But you kind of like you do, okay, every time we have a bite of food, we get one of these marbles that we can put here on the board. And so there are so many different variations of games. So I would start by just creating a list of all the things your child loves, and then thinking of game ideas that incorporate introducing new foods or talking about new foods to your child. And then start working with that. And then always pay attention to your own mindset of when you're presenting those food. What are you thinking? How are you feeling? You want to be in a really relaxed state of mind. You want to be really positive. You want to be playful. And remember, it's not about your child eating that food in that moment. It's about you being relaxed and inviting your child to want to participate. Even if your child is feeding it to you, that's okay. Now, when you're making eating new foods fun, and you get rid of the unwanted foods, eventually your child will be hungry enough that they will bring themselves to want to eat that food that you and their favorite character have been eating, right? Because that's all there is available. There's all that is around. And that's where the next piece comes in, which is we give control to our children over how and when they eat. We, the adults in our lives, we control the what. We control what we offer them to eat. So I'm not going to offer them cupcakes. I'm not going to offer them donuts. I'm not going to offer them ice cream, because I know those foods are going to feed the pathogens that are creating the the symptoms that my child has, right? So I'm not going to offer them those foods. So I control the what. I'm going to offer them meats and vegetables and whatever foods you decided you want to offer to your child that are going to support their body. But they control when and how. So if they want to walk around, they want to pace around while they eat, that's okay. If they're pacing around while they're eating, it's because that's helping them in some way. Maybe it's helping with their digestion, maybe it's helping with sensory processing, maybe it's helping them with gaining a sense of control, because eating a new food is actually giving them a lesser sense of control, because now there's something in their routine that is being changed. So maybe they need to pace around to feel like they're in control of something. That's okay. It's okay for them to pace around. They don't have to sit down to eat that meal. Eventually, you will be able to help your child sit down and eat a meal with you, but that's not the goal right now. The goal is to give them that control. That doesn't mean we let them run the house. We're just giving control over when and how they eat, so that they actually feel comfortable with taking that step towards participating in this thing that we want for them, which is the new diet. So we give them control. Let me see if there's anything else. We make it fun and inviting. And then there are times that we might need to set a boundary and we might need to negotiate. And this might apply more to people who are already currently doing GAPS diet and they want to move on to doing the introduction diet with their kids. So sometimes when people start with the full GAPS diet, the child will eat roasts and will eat roasted meats and salads. But the parents, depending on the parent and depending on the child's condition, they might decide, okay, I want to really encourage more stock, more meat stock for whatever reason, whatever your child's symptoms are, you know that meat stock is going to help. So sometimes you could set a boundary and say, okay, so before we actually eat the steak or before we eat the salad, we got to have a cup of meat stock. And then we just set that boundary and say, so this is the meat stock. Once you finish this, then we can have the next food. Or let's say if your child loves cucumber and you want them to eat some cucumber, but you don't want them to eat like the only thing in their meal is a cucumber. So you say, okay, you can have this cucumber, but let's have something else instead, right? So you start incorporating the new foods. And then another way to do this is also, I have this cup with penguins because there's this one boy that I work with and he loves penguins. So also, again, we want to make it motivating and we want to set a boundary. Say, okay, so I have the penguins here that you love and they're holding on to the stock that it will help you. So before I give you the steak, let's have a sip of this. So maybe my child has a sip of the meat stock and then I give them a little bit of the steak. Okay, let's have another sip of stock and another piece of steak. But through the whole process, I want to be very positive, playful, relaxed, and celebratory. Like I want to really acknowledge when my child just smells the meat stock, I'm like, yay, that was awesome. You smell the meat stock. That's wonderful. That's one step towards drinking it, right? So we want to really help them feel successful and feel like they are doing this. I also want to share, I mentioned to you guys some of the books, so I'm just going to share with you now. So it's all in one video. So in terms of helping our kids with eating a new diet, one great way is explaining to them the benefit of eating a new diet. And a great way is using books. A lot of our kids love books. And so I'm going to show you guys some of the books here. This is one of my favorite, which is called The Gut Garden. And this is the author, Katie Brosnan, The Gut Garden. The reason why I love this book, I'm going to show you guys some of the illustrations here. Oh, there's some recipes here, like really friendly recipes written for kids on the benefits of fermented food and how fermented food or probiotic food that help us rebuild the microbiome and introduce beneficial microbes into our digestive system, and how the beneficial microbes help us in so many different ways. But then it also has all these recipes here so that you can do this at home with your child, which is really fun. Then there's some illustrations here that show what the food does, that the food comes and goes through our digestive tract and gets absorbed through the bloodstream. And then that food, the nutrients that are absorbed into our bloodstream then circulate through our whole body and bring nutrition to the whole body. So this is also great for our kids to see that. You see there's like the picture here that shows the digestive tract and all the organs and how they benefit. It's a really, really great book. So this is the Gut Garden. Then a lot of our kids have challenge with pooping. A lot of our kids are constipated, which is the most common one now. Some kids have diarrhea as well, but a lot of our kids are dealing with constipation, gas, bloating. So there's this book, which is The Truth About Poop and the Importance of Poop. And the authors here is Susan Goodman, sorry. And there's some really nice illustrations here too, and it talks about what helps us with poop and the importance of poop. Great book. Then there is The Magic Scubas Inside the Human Body. Also has some illustrations talking about the human body and beneficial bacteria and how that works. Another great book. This would be more for a little bit of an older child. So the ones that I mentioned before, maybe for a child from 3 to 8, 9, even 10. And then if we're talking about like a tween or a teenager, I might go with this book, which is It Takes Guts. And the author is Dr. Jennifer Gardy. Takes Guts. So there you go. Also, if you have a younger child who is very sophisticated, who already reads books and is quite engaged, they might like this book too, because it has a lot of information, but it also has some illustration. Most of it is like big text, but it does have some like this. And it does have some pictures. It's also another great book. And then the last one, it's called The Good Germ Hotel. And the author here is Kim. That's the author's name. I'm not going to attempt to say it because it's, I don't know what language this name is. But anyway, this is also a very great book. So here you guys have some resources. You guys can also create your own books at home. This is a book that I created for a child that I was working with. Actually, some of you might know him or his mom. So this is actually a handmade book. And so you can use the child's made motivation, what they love, and then write a story about how Peter Cat started eating a new diet. And so you can create that together with your child and make it really fun and motivating. So this is it for now. We are going to meet. So for those of you that are doing the group classes with me, we are going to meet still on the 16th or whatever the date is. Let me tell you guys. On the 14th, June 14th, we're still going to meet and we're going to do our Q&A. Any questions you guys have, feel free to email them to me in advance as well. But I wanted to have this video recorded just in case, because I can, and that will make sure that you guys have all the information, because I'm going to be traveling and we'll see. But I think I'm going to have internet and it will be fine. But I just wanted to have this as a safety net. All right, take care, everybody. We'll be talking soon. Thank you.